Hey guys, it's Sherry Vegas, and in this tutorial today I'm going to show you how you can create a painting just like this in the modern bloom style using palette knives and textured paint. So I have been really struggling to kind of get a little bit of inspiration for resin art. I haven't created like proper resin art piece to sell in quite a while because I've just had like no art inspiration. So I decided to go on Pinterest and I kind of fell down a rabbit hole of like palette knife painting, and then I kind of found this style where it's like sort of more abstracty flower, modern sort of modern blooms is kind of what I'm calling it, where it's not trying to be like too accurate like as the traditional palette knife painting for flowers normally is, and I really liked it. I'm going to list a few artists that I found on Pinterest that I really they all have quite like similar styles when it comes to this, and they really inspired me to start working with like sort of palette knife paintings. And so I thought I would do a tutorial on how I created this piece, how I got there, talk about the different mediums and stuff like that. So I'm going to put these guys up on the screen here. Definitely go and check them out. They were a big inspiration for this, and it kind of got me out of my little art rut that I've been in. And basically the whole week I have been a non-stop palette knife flower painting. I have done this piece that I'm showing you how to do today. I did this piece. I have done the piece over here and the piece over here. So that kind of like my evolution and kind of working out how to do this. And I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about what I found really helpful to achieve this, because it looks really simple, but there are a few like sort of tips and tricks that I would really recommend doing when you guys give it a go. So for my first experimental piece, which was this one over here, I just used a stock standard textured paste. This one was from Bunnings and it was only $8 and I already had it on hand. I did struggle a little bit with this because it was, even though it is a textured paste, it doesn't have a good hold to it, I guess is the best way. It was too soft to work with it, and as I kind of like tried to do the flowers, I'll show you, I'll put a clip over, they just don't come out as neat. It looked really messy. I even mixed a bit of sand in that I also had on hand to see if that would help, and it did help give it a bit more structure to the paste. But I did find that this paste, because it is just a normal texture paste, was just too soft and it was really hard to work with. But obviously if you find this paste works really well, that's, you know, go for it. Then I went and got these from Spotlight to give these two a crack. So modeling paste, and I got a coarse texture gel. I mixed these two together and I found that they weren't too bad. They give you a matte finish, which I did for this one. I still did struggle a little bit getting like the perfect consistency mixing these two together, and I did find it was still that tiny bit little too fluid, but it did give a really nice cool matte finish. So I really did like that. But then ultimately I landed on this acrylic medium, and this is a matte acrylic medium that dries clear, and it is their flexible modeling paste, and it's a heavy body paste. And the difference between these two, I found that this held its structure way better. It is also like 3 or 4 times the price for pretty much the same amount. I'm pretty sure it's the same amount. But it held the sort of, as I was doing my technique, it held a lot better. It didn't go everywhere and it looked a lot neater, and I just found it a lot easier to work with. It just had more structure to it. So I really like this. I'm definitely going to keep going through a whole bunch of different modeling pastes because there are a lot out there on the market, and keep playing with different ones. But so far the acrylic medium from Liquitex, this one was really good, and that's what I used to achieve this piece in the tutorial that I'm going to show you today. I also did find that these two paints worked really well in it. The Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylic Paint, and then the Atelier Interactive Acrylic. These were really good. I also did try out some really cheap acrylics, like some from Bunnings, different ones from Spotlight, which you'll see me using throughout this process. But I found that these two mixed in with this held really well and were really easy to work with, and sort of your cheaper, more fluid paints affected how this worked and made it a bit more softer, and then made certain colors harder to work with, if that makes sense. I hope that is making sense to everyone. So on this one, some of these, like the blues, were more fluid, and I found it really hard. It wasn't like holding, but then the oranges came out a lot cleaner and I got better shapes, and that was because I used a heavy body paint. So I did find it made a difference when working with it. So when you are mixing up, I would recommend getting a heavy body paste. You can look for a matte finish, you could look for a gloss finish, it's up to you, but I found that really helpful, and heavy body acrylics over your more like cheaper fluid acrylics.
For the background of my canvas, I've just put some acrylic paint down. These are the colours that I'm going to be using today when I do start my palette knife painting, and then I'm just using a brush to blend them all together. I want it to be like really soft fading of colour into each new one, and I'm using like mostly warm colours today with a soft unbleached white as well, and I'm just going to blend that all in together because I don't want any particular area to be too strong with the colour. I just want them to all look like they're fading into each other. While I'm waiting for my canvas to dry, I start prepping my palette knife paint. I'm putting down that Liquitex Heavy Body Medium, and I'm probably doing about 1/4 of my acrylic paint to 3/4 of my medium. It does make your colours go a little bit pastel-y, but overall I found it didn't change my colours too much. And then I just like to give that a really good mix through to make sure both the acrylic paint and the medium have combined together. I've mixed all my colours up and my board is dry, so it's time to start painting. I like to just use my palette knife to go back and forth throughout the paint to slowly build up and grab a decent amount of my paint. The more paint you have, the bigger and more 3D your petals are going to look. I found that there was a few different factors that affected the way that your flowers would turn out with this technique. The first one is obviously the medium that you're using with the acrylic paint. If it's not thick enough, you'll find that your flower petals won't hold shape and it'll be a lot harder to work with. The second one that I found was the amount of paint that you're putting onto your palette knife. The third is the technique that you're using to place down that paint. And the fourth one that I found that really affected it was how much pressure you're using when you do place your palette knife down and swipe. I found that wherever the pointed end of your palette knife is where you're going to get the tip of your petal. I like to place down a decent amount and then draw back towards me. I also found that it made it a lot easier if I would turn the canvas around and rotate than to try to rotate my hand around. That way I would get nice even petals the whole way around my flower. There was two different ways that I found that I like to create my flowers. The first way that I showed you where the tip of my palette knife was facing out, and this second way where the tip of my palette knife is facing in towards the center of the flower. When you do it this way with the palette knife facing in towards the center of the flower, you're going to get more rounded petals on the outside instead of like the first technique where I had more of a sharper point to my petals on the outside. What I did find with this is if you do a flower petal that you're not happy with, you can always just go back and grab up some more of your paint and then go back over the top. This paint takes a few days to dry, so you've got quite a while to work with it, and you don't have to worry about petals drying out before you finish the painting. So if you want a petal to be bigger, you can always just pick up some more with your palette knife and go straight back over the top. When creating my design, I found that there was two different ways that I found helpful. One is picking one side and then working out from that side, building up as you go along. And the second way that I did like to work with creating design was by placing down all of my big statement flowers and then adding all of my smaller detail petals around those big flowers. Those were the two ways that I found I created some really beautiful designs. Because the acrylic paint is so thick in all of these petals, you're going to have to let it dry for quite a while for the paint to be fully dry the whole way through. Because it's been raining a lot here where I live in Brisbane, I found that it took about a week and a half for all of these petals to dry before I could place my painting upright. So that's just something to think about if you are going to be doing these. They do take quite a while to dry properly.
I have become obsessed with this sort of modern palette knife painting, and I think it's just going to be like a nice little break from resin for a bit. I'm definitely not stopping resin, so don't worry, but I think I just needed a little bit of a break because I was kind of running a bit flat on ideas or inspiration. Definitely go and check out those artists that I mentioned before that inspired this technique. And I'm also going to go and buy a bunch more different mediums and textured pastes and see if they make any difference. So if you want an update video about this sort of style, and if I find anything else that's really helpful with creating these pieces, or if I change any techniques, let me know in the comments below. Or if you have any other helpful like tips or tricks with this, because I am still quite new at this, but I really enjoyed it. I really like how I can take my time with it and I'm not rushing, and also the fact that I don't have to be like fully respirated up, gloves, everything to work with this medium like I do with resin. So it was just a really nice like little break, and hopefully I'll come back to resin and feel like super inspired. But if you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. It really helps me out. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe as I post new art videos every single week. And thank you guys so much for watching.